What happens when federal force and local fury collide in the heart of Minneapolis?
Many different individuals protesting, agitating, and things like that. These agitators are out of control, and they will do almost anything, it seems, to try to stop our mission.
Well, right now, as of January 2026, Minneapolis, Minnesota is now the epicenter of one of the most intense domestic confrontations in recent U.S. history.
They just started marching. It's very loud. They have drums, they have whistles, they have bullhorns, and the reason is because they are going outside hotels where they believe ICE agents are sleeping.
And it did not start with a rumor or even a meme. It actually began with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE agents, carrying out an enforcement operation that culminated into the shooting of a civilian and basically an event that triggered citywide outrage and protest that has refused to let go.
Medical help. We need mental help. Mental help. The bleeding is natural from Nazi ears.
Now, in response to the escalations, President Donald J. Trump, now the sitting president of the United States, has threatened to invoke extraordinary powers and has positioned the National Guard units on standby as the federal government stands its ground. Now, meanwhile, you got residents, activists, passersby. They've all found themselves caught between clashes with ICE, confrontations with countergroups, and even a local police force that's struggling to maintain order.
Politicians are celebrating those doing hand-to-hand combat with law enforcement. Somehow they are now martyrs.
So what started as this reaction to federal tactics, it's now spilled into everyday life with tear gas in residential streets, subdivisions. It is crazy. I'm pretty sure those HOA fees are about to go through the roof.
Get it off, dog. Take it off. You're not going to. Take it off. It's going to hurt. Take it off. Nothing. Take it off.
Anyway, families are hospitalized and a city is asking itself whether it can even survive the chaos. So today, we're going to go ahead and break down, we're going to unpack how Minneapolis became this flashpoint, what it actually reveals about federal power versus community resistance, and why this moment feels like the city's breaking point, not just another protest story. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you appreciate the daily updates.
Those aren't calls to peacefully protest. Those are calls to violence, which we have seen every single day.
Okay, guys, here is the part that most people are missing. What pushed Minneapolis over the edge wasn't just another protest call or some viral clip. It was actually the federal shooting tied to ICE enforcement that shattered whatever restraint remained in the city. Now, let me know who you think was right. Do you think that Renee Good was right? Do you think ICE was right in that situation? Drop an ICE if you think it was ICE. Drop a Renee if you think it was Renee. Now, what we don't know and what fueled the chaos was the full context. It was really the motive, the chain of command behind that moment. Into that vacuum, rushed speculation, okay? Now, this moment mattered more than past unrest because the infrastructure was already waiting. Protest networks in Minnesota, they don't need days to mobilize. They only needed hours. Live streams went up. Messaging channels lit up. Rally points were shared and reshared before local officials even finished drafting statements. Now, unlike earlier protests framed around broad grievances, this one had a sharp trigger and a clear target. Federal authority itself. And once that line was crossed, the city wasn't reacting anymore, it was combusting. And so this is where the protest stopped being a protest. As crowds grew, anti-ICE activism in Minneapolis shifted from signs and chants into something way more coercive. Street-level enforcement. Civilians weren't debated, they were tested. People were confronted for looking like ICE.
Police! Let him up! Okay. He's one of us. Okay, good. You alright, dude? You alright? Come on. He's one of us. How do we know? How we know? I was with him earlier. Why you get ran out earlier? I don't know. He's one of us. I'm with them.
For working tech jobs, for wearing the wrong clothes, for simply just refusing to chant on command. Say it. Renounce ICE. Prove you're with us. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that ain't symbolism. That was a loyalty test enforced by numbers. Protesters began acting like roaming patrols, filming faces and surrounding individuals, and ultimately just demanding verbal compliance. Now, if you hesitated, suspicion followed. If you resisted, intimidation escalated. And so this wasn't about stopping federal agents. This was about controlling public space. What made this different from previous unrest was precision. Targets weren't abstract systems. They were random people on sidewalks at lunch, walking to work.
You ice or not? Ice, right? That's right. Say it proud. Say it proud.
Activism became performative authority enforced by the threat of violence, not the strength of an argument. And once that shift happened, there was no clear off-ramp. So this is where it gets worse, because the target list didn't stop at politics. In Minneapolis, ordinary civilians, they became suspects simply for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Tech workers grabbing lunch, photographers doing their jobs, people walking back to offices. All of a sudden, they're suddenly being treated like some hostile actors. Employment itself became evidence. If you had a badge, a laptop, or a job that looked corporate, you were fair game. Masculinity was reframed as a threat. Men were confronted, filmed, surrounded, and even accused of being undercover ICE agents with no proof whatsoever. Phones were raised not to document wrongdoing, but to intimidate. Basically a silent warning that your face would be broadcast if you didn't comply. This wasn't crowd energy spiraling out of control. This was social pressure being weaponized. So here's a new angle that most people missed. These confrontations, they weren't reactive, they were proactive. The goal was not to stop enforcement, it was to signal dominance over public space. And once that signal was set, fear did the rest of the work.
Are you ice? No. Do you like ice? Say ice! Say it! Say it!
And what you're watching unfold right here in Minneapolis is really about uncertainty. People realizing, often too late, that the systems that they assumed were solid, they're not. And the same pattern shows up somewhere else, a lot closer to home. Now, most retirees, they assume that their Medicare plan is fine, right up until they hear how many people around them are quietly reviewing their Medicare plans. And this is what's happening right now. Neighbors, friends, folks at church, couples, not panicking, just double checking before another year slips by, because nobody wants to be the last one to find out that they overpaid, right? Or maybe even that a gap that they didn't see is about to cost them. Who wants that? Exactly. And this is why so many people are already calling the phone number at the bottom of your screen right there, 909-563-8279, or they're clicking the link right now to go to askchapter.org/Ron to have their Medicare coverage reviewed side by side before it becomes a problem instead of a question. Oh, and by the way, Chapter does it completely for free. So when you call them, make sure you tell my friends over at Chapter Ron says hello. Okay, so let's get back to Minneapolis, because this story does not slow down from here one bit. In fact, then the movement started eating itself. In the chaos on Minneapolis streets, activists were attacked by their own side, not because they opposed the cause, but because they couldn't immediately prove loyalty.
Why are you? We're on your side! We're on your side! Holy!
People were chased and beaten and only spared when someone stepped in and said, hey, it's okay. He's one of us.
Then why are you here? I'm just trying to drive along. If you're not with us, then you're against us.
We do custom apps for a whole bunch of companies around Minnesota and the country.
Why are you here? Because you're filming us.
Think about that for a second, guys. Safety depended on personal recognition, not principle. This is mob psychology in real time. So once a crowd loses leadership and structure, suspicion replaces coordination. Mistaken identity suddenly becomes inevitable. And when violence is normalized, correction, it comes too late. Now, in multiple incidents, local sheriffs had to physically extract injured protesters from the same crowd that they arrived with. Not federal agents, local law enforcement stepping in to prevent activists from killing activists.
You guys are rolling my window down.
Oh, he's all bloody. Yeah.
Is that Jake?
I know, it sounds really, really silly, but this is what leaderless movements look like under stress. There's no hierarchy, there's no breaks, there's just escalation. So the irony is brutal. A movement claiming moral authority couldn't even protect its own people once fear took over. And so this was the moment that everything went national. All 50 states, folks. A right-wing influencer announced that he would burn a religious book outside City Hall in Minneapolis. Provocative? Absolutely. Legal? Still? Yes, absolutely. But here's the part that really matters. What happened after he tried to leave? He didn't get escorted away. He didn't get separated. He got surrounded. Video after video is showing this guy getting swallowed by a moving wall of bodies. He was punched, he was dragged, he was beaten from multiple directions. At least one attacker used a blade, and the only reason he walked away alive is because he was wearing a protective vest that stopped what could have been a fatal strike. And even after he retreated, the violence just didn't stop. The crowd chased him, doors were pulled, cars were swarmed.
That's him! That's him! Is that him? Is that him? Yes! Open the door! Oh my God! Drive!
This wasn't about stopping an act. This was about punishing a person. Now, that distinction matters because once a crowd decides escape is not enough, the rules have already collapsed.
And when people are disappeared in the darkness, American democracy dies.
It's not just because of a beef that they've got with Tim Walz in Minnesota. They think this is a nationwide problem, fraudulent taxpayer payments to businesses that don't exist.
Congress, they are disappearing you as citizens. They are disappearing people who have proper documentation. This should not be allowed.
The hotel where I just sang, where they...
Say this once clearly and move on. In the United States, burning a flag is protected speech. Burning a book, even an offensive one, is also protected speech. You don't have to like it. You don't even have to respect it, but you don't get to violently erase it. This is the line Minneapolis crossed. So what made this moment different wasn't the provocation, it was the response. A left-wing mob decided that speech that they hated justified physical harm. Not removal, not protest, harm. And this is not activism, okay? That's enforcement. And when enforcement shifts from law to crowds, rights stop being rights. They become permissions granted by whoever yells the loudest. And so this crossed a national line because it just showed how quickly constitutional protections evaporate when institutions step back. There's no warning, there's no buffer, there's no consequence in the moment, just bodies enforcing silence. And so say it once, free speech didn't fail here.
I think they're pulling them out.
They're pulling them out. They're pulling them out. Leave! 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 Leave!
The system meant to protect it did. And so this is the question that everybody keeps asking. And this is the right one. Where was Minneapolis Police Department when streets spiraled? I mean, the answer is rather uncomfortable, present, but hesitant. Officers appeared only after violence had already taken hold. And even then, their actions were limited to light crowd management, pushing, separating, retreating. There was no decisive dispersals, no firm perimeter control, no early intervention when intimidation first surfaced. That hesitation matters. In moments like this, crowds read signals fast. When mobs see authority pull back, they don't calm down. They test the boundaries. And once those boundaries hold, behavior escalates. The cost of delay is not theoretical. It's broken bones, stabbings, even civilians forced to fend for themselves in public spaces. Now, this wasn't necessarily about capability. It was about risk tolerance. Officers appeared constrained by policy, optics, and political pressure. And when law enforcement becomes reactive instead of preventative, order isn't restored, it's negotiated. And this is how a vacuum forms. And vacuums get filled by whoever's the loudest. Now, here's the part that quietly raised the stakes. The National Guard wasn't absent. Units were visibly staged outside Minneapolis, with reports confirming at least 2 National Guard battalions ready if called. And yet, they weren't deployed. Now, that distinction matters. Power that isn't used doesn't stabilize a situation, it creates uncertainty. In fact, for protesters, non-deployment looked like permission. Now, for residents, it looked like abandonment. Everyone could see the capability sitting just beyond city limits, but no one knew when or even if it would ever be activated. But that ambiguity, it fed tension instead of calming it. People began acting as if no backstop existed at all. Politically, This mattered because deploying the National Guard signals escalation. Not deploying the National Guard signals restraint. And in Minneapolis, Minnesota, restraint was interpreted as weakness by those who were willing to push a little bit further. And so this was not about tanks rolling through the streets. This was about preventing collapse before it spread. And once the National Guard becomes a last resort instead of a stabilizer, the window for calm narrows fast. Now, here's the part that most people missed, okay? The streets didn't radicalize on their own. They were primed online first. Look, there were online platforms like Reddit. Anybody ever heard of Reddit? Yeah. Protest threads turned into countdown clocks. Users pushed each other toward risk with escalating language. Show up, hold the line, record a farewell. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not organization. That is martyr psychology. And so what really mattered wasn't accuracy, it was urgency. Claims spread faster than corrections. Worst case assumptions became rally cries. Some posts urged people to treat confrontation as proof of commitment and not danger. And once that mindset lands, restraint feels like betrayal. The digital echo chamber didn't just amplify anger. It framed personal safety as optional and violence as inevitable. Now, this is where online dynamics cross into real harm. When anonymous encouragement meets crowds already tense, accountability disappears. People arrive believing history demands escalation. Phones come out not to de-escalate, but to document bravery. And when reality doesn't match the script, the backlash hits the closest target. Online hype didn't cause this unrest, but it absolutely did sharpen it. Context matters, but repetition matters more than that. So what unfolded in Minneapolis followed a familiar pattern that was seen earlier during earlier unrest that was tied to Black Lives Matter. Does anybody remember the BLM situation? Public shaming, loyalty tests, intimidation, even threats that were meant to silence, not persuade. So the branding changes, but the tactics don't. Crowds used exposure as punishment. People were surrounded, filmed, mocked, and even threatened. Sexual taunts and humiliation were deployed as tools and not jokes. That's not spontaneous outrage, that's coercion. And the irony is sharp. Movements claiming to fight authoritarianism repeatedly use authoritarian methods. They enforced speech, they punished for dissent, and even violence as deterrents. History has names for this, okay? During World War II, Axis Sally tried to demoralize enemies through broadcast intimidation. Different era, same impulse, break resolved by targeting the individual. The lesson isn't moral equivalence, it's pattern recognition. So when protests adopt these tactics, it stops being a check on power and it becomes a mirror of it. And so this is where everything converges. What happened in Minneapolis no longer stays local because the central conflict isn't between neighbors, it's between a city and a federal authority. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is a federal agency. And so when its operations trigger sustained unrest, the responsibility ultimately moves upward. And this is why this lands on Donald J. Trump. They've seen this before. During prolonged anti-ICE riots in Los Angeles, federal intervention became unavoidable once local control failed. And so the lesson from these moments wasn't that force solves everything. It was that uncertainty solves nothing. And when cities hesitate, chaos fills the gap. When states stall, the federal government inherits the problem. What intervention signals now isn't punishment, it's a line being drawn. It says public space cannot be governed by mobs, speech cannot be regulated by fists, and enforcement cannot be nullified by intimidation. So whether people like the message or not, this is the moment the country decides who actually runs its cities.